Wait, he's saying that I hung up? Wait, what? Hold on one second. This is well, now that we're over, I'll never talk to him again. I just don't think he's like interested in moving towards those the truth claims that in the way that I'm interested in moving towards them. Which sounds like really that sounds really arrogant to say. I understand that, but like his arguments were ridiculous. All right. Well, we learned two things from this conversation. Initially, for my first conversation, but it was only because I hadn't challenged him on any points. And I kind of understand. I kind of thought that this could happen. Initially, he sounded like somebody that was very interested in arriving at the truth matter of the arguments. That I believed initially that he thought that he was making truth claims about most of the stuff that he talked about. And so I came into this conversation with enough facts and figures that if he's sincerely looking for truth claims, what I expected was him to say, I'll get back to you on most of the arguments. I think he got really mad at the name calling. That's what I was expecting for most of this conversation. But what happened was every time I started to give him fact-based, very specific arguments, he started to weasel around. And then I started to realize that, and I realized actually at the number one point that he wasn't really interested in arriving at any kind of fact-based or truth-based argument. So for instance, he says I've been obsessing over this. I mean, I did create like a pretty extensive outline. I'm sad that we didn't get to all of my material. But so like, for instance, when we talk about like the will of the people argument, right? There is so much data about different things that what the Americans thought about at the time, the fact that it had bipartisan support, the fact that there are just so many things that support the idea that like the will of the people was represented. It's a pretty easy thing. But he kept going back to like this really weird Flea and Fuentes kept going back to this really weird, well, I've got a poll that says this thing and I don't believe your polls. And then he kept referencing like conspiracies that don't exist, like this Kalergi plan. I couldn't find anything about it. The Houghton plan, I did find information about. It was literally just an article written in a newspaper by some anthropologist, and it was his ideas on how to destroy German nationalism. But it doesn't mention Africans in here. It doesn't mention Western society, and it was never implemented by anybody, right? So I kind of was hoping that for most of our debate that we would kind of like go through each of these points and that that I could show him like, well, look, the data says you're wrong. And then eventually he would be like, oh, okay, well, you're right. Yeah, I guess. Or I didn't expect him to say that. I expected him to say, well, I'll come back next time. There's more research that I can do here that proves you wrong. That's more what I was looking for, right? And it's kind of bizarre to me that he kept saying that my arguments were wishy-washy. So, for instance, in the Constitution, there's nothing in there about immigration from European countries. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't, right? So that puts a mighty big burden on him to prove that that was an intention of the original founding fathers. And the only thing he has for that is the one time John Jay inserts the word posterity in the Constitution. But when he references the Federalist Papers, John Jay's not talking about posterity in here. He's not even talking about immigration in here. So that's like a really big stretch, and he wouldn't admit to any of that. He was like, well, this one sentence from John Jay definitely proves it. And then when I can find all this evidence that, one, there was no idea that this was supposed to be a European primary country. That just doesn't exist. And two, even his definition of white people is something that absolutely doesn't exist, right? That Benjamin Franklin had an entirely different concept of what it meant to be white than what Fuentes does today, which is beautiful, which ironically enough, foreigner Fuentes is a white guy, right? And this kind of like goes to prove my point, ironically enough, as a multiculturalist, or if that's what you want to call me. I hate the word. It just sounds like a dumb word to me. But like Nick is 25% Hispanic, and he considers himself to be white enough for white America. And he gets there by way of like soul math, right? Well, actually, I don't know any of the background of like different types of Hispanics or whatever. Like, well, these kinds go back to the Spanish, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what, dude? Benjamin Franklin didn't consider Spanish people any more whiter than Italians, French, or Russians and Swedes, all of whom he called swarthy, right? But even somebody like him, he considers himself white. Or I'm white. I'm half Cuban and I'm white. Or John Arian, I think that's his last name. Jontron. He considers himself white. He's like Middle Eastern. He's like half. He wouldn't even be like. I don't even know if he would be like a free person in like the days of I don't know, like how dark skinned. I don't know exactly. What was our stance on Middle Easterners in early United States history? I have no idea. But oh, is it John Jafari? I thought his middle name like Aryan or some shit. I'm sorry. Did I read like memes? Oh, he might not have considered me white though. Or look at this obsession. Look at how much he's straining. 91% white. Yeah, it's a hilarious concept. The person that I argued with from the Daily Stormer, he was more intellectually honest about his position in an ethno-state, and that was a very difficult conversation for me because he made logical concessions. When I argued with the Daily Stormer guy, that guy said that he understood that if he was going to create an ethno-state, he would be a slave in that society, and he said he was okay with that he understood he wasn't pure enough for it. So, like, I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of philosophical assertions that I could make, but on the surface, he's at least being intellectually honest that he's not pure enough for his ethno state. But little Nicky here, I'm not sure. Foreigner Fuentes. So I don't know. It seemed really strange that he was making. Do I need to explain my girl hair color analogy more? That the only poll he would cite was one that already presupposed his argument. That was the only poll that he was willing to cite for. Yeah, I don't know. We could walk through this. I guess I'll publish this for you guys if you ever want to use any of this. There might be things that you could criticize in here for sure, but no Scandinavia, no Italians, no French, no Germans. When he cites the 1790 U.S. Census data, he kind of brought this up, like. When he talked about, like, the Constitution establishes natural rights, so he probably has a bigger history background than me, but he misrepresents so much, which is what bothers me. So insofar as what I know about the Constitution, the idea behind the Constitution wasn't to say that a God existed. It was just to say that that your rights come from something greater than government. Now, whatever you believe that to be, I believe that's true, and I'm an atheist. I think that you can make philosophical arguments for your rights that should exist that are greater than government, that government should have moral obligations to provide certain things for people. But I can believe that without being religious, like social contract theory he kept bringing up. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can believe in social contract theory without being religious. You don't need a God for any of that. Christianity is not given any special consideration in any part of the Constitution. Our posterity, I mean, it's American posterity. It doesn't say European posterity. It doesn't say Christian posterity. He just doesn't have... He just didn't make any good. I really feel like he didn't make any good arguments for any of this. We didn't get into this topic at all. Immigrants importing their problems. So once again, he keeps like, I don't know. He keeps like, he wouldn't give me any data. Fuck, I'm really irritated because I looked up like so much data for this. I had so much data for this. Yeah, I don't know. This doesn't seem to be like a thing. I legitimately tried to look for data that went against mine because I'm really scared. In any kind of argument that I go into, I'm always scared that I'm wrong. Like, I don't want to go into an argument against somebody that I feel like does research and be wrong. Like, fuck, that would suck. Why would I ever do that? Like, I would look like a fucking idiot, you know? So, no, like, I put a lot of work into putting this together to make sure that, like, I don't think that there are people that are in the business of collecting stats that legitimately believe that immigrants commit more crime than natives. And this idea that we're missing it with, like, second-generation immigrants somehow or something is It's a valid hypothesis, but now you have to provide the data to prove that. And Numberless Nick couldn't give me a source on anything. He kept giving me this really unrelated data. There's 10 million Mexicans. Well, okay, what does that have to do with integration, Nick? What does that have to do with any of the points you bring in? He would just give me like this random disjointed data. I think it's because he wasn't prepared for this at all. And maybe I over-prepared. Oh, I didn't get to read this quote at all either. So Andrew Balls, PIMCO's chief investment officer for global fixed income, former Financial Times journalist and ex-teacher of economics at Oxford, published an article in the National Bureau of Economic Research remarking on such as the correlation between geography, the temperate versus non-temperate zone, and its impact on societies. Just that there's like lots of problems that countries experience that they can't bring with them, right? Like Africans can't immigrate to the United States and bring shitty temperatures, right, that cause worse diseases, worse overall medical care, worse, farming conditions. Like this is kind of there are conditions that don't come here from immigrants. And we didn't get to talk about this either. Foreign-born populations from Africa are actually some of the most educated people in the country, and they actually hold degrees higher than European immigrants. Foreign-born population in the United States in 2010, this is a 2012 report by the U.S. Census, shows that if you come from Africa, you've got a 10% higher chance of having a bachelor's degree than if you come from Europe. Now, you can argue You can argue that maybe the degrees are easier to get in Africa or some shit. But like, even if you look at like the breakdown of like the numbers, like for instance, Nigerians are highly educated. The median income for Nigerians is higher than the median income for the average American, right? That their median income is 62,000. So it's not like they get like fake degrees and come to the United States and do fuck all or whatever. There are communities of white people that commit crime, the Italian Mafia, the Ku Klux Klan, although I don't know if people consider this crime bad. Biker gangs are primarily white people, meth labs and drugs in the rural Midwest, the Aryan Brotherhood. These are just examples because he brought up that that white people don't commit crime in enclaves like immigrants do. Gallopin' Nick. I like this one. When Africa sends people, they're not sending their worst guys. They're sending their most educated people. I was trying to look up numbers on the fly. It was really hard. I was trying to fact check them on the fly. That's really hard to do. We didn't get to do any of the economic argument. The economic argument and the crime argument were the two that I felt the most strongly about. Because these are the slam dunk arguments. Nobody legitimate argues against the crime thing, and nobody legitimate argues against the economic thing. They just don't. Immigrants are definitely a boon to the economy, and they seem to commit less crime when you adjust for reasonable statistics, reasonable features or whatever. They seem to commit more or less crime than their native counterparts. These two things are like not debated. It just seems like, or I couldn't find any evidence debating them. I found like there was like a Daily Caller article, I think, I have somewhere where like they try to like, if you cherry pick very specific stats in very specific states, you can get some overrepresentation of immigrant crime. For instance, I think like if you look at only like drug runners like in Texas, and you only look at like federal incarcerations and you ignore state incarceration, like you can find overrepresentations of Hispanics, but most of those arguments seem like they were really heavily cherry-picked. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if anybody has like alternate crime data, I'd be really interested to see it, because it would be a big deal if you could find it, because I just can't find any of this data that shows that immigrants are committing more crime than natives. I just can't find that information. What else did we not? So we didn't get to talk about any of the economics. Fuck. This was a big slam dunker here. We didn't get to talk about the social cohesion argument. This is a big one too. I really wanted to bring up the social cohesion argument. The last time I got into a debate with Nick, he brought up Robert Putnam. And Robert Putnam was the singular person that he cited to prove that we could not be socially cohesive. We could not be socially cohesive with immigrants in the United States. He cited Putnam's research to prove that. But the funny thing is that Putnam himself doesn't agree with that assertion. And he actually feels so strongly against it that when the United States Supreme Court ruled on Fisher versus University of Texas, which had to do with affirmative action policies. Basically, some chick didn't get into the school and she blamed affirmative action. When they went to court, Fisher cited Putnam's research as evidence for why affirmative action shouldn't exist. Putnam himself filed a brief with the Supreme Court saying, this bitch is crazy. She's taking all of my research out of context, and I absolutely disagree. And I have quotes from Putnam himself in here defending immigration, defending the integration of foreigners into our community, and proclaiming the benefits of things like increased diversity and increased integration of people from other countries here. Fuck. I even had like, there's like YouTube quote. I listened to these videos.
It's not a way of saying stop worrying about these other poor kids in America. The immigrants are going to fix it for us.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's interesting.
And by the way, family stability in the second generation of immigrants they revert to the American pattern. That is, the families become less stable.
Right, assimilation.
The American, oof. Now, the funniest thing is that some of the biggest increases in integration of in foreigners was actually negative. So, for instance, when immigrants first come over, they don't commit as much crime, but the first and second generations start to commit more crime, but that's because they're approaching the native crime rates. Hold on, let me see if I can find this. I actually had a Pew article about this that was kind of funny. Crime rises among second-generation immigrants as they assimilate. So this is our first-generation immigration, right? This is our first-generation immigrant crime rates. These are the second-generation immigrant crime rates, right? Where because of integration, potentially, right? That's a pretty hard causal link to make. I'll be honest about that. Maybe there are other things going on, but like I thought that was kind of funny that second-generation immigrants commit more crime because they're more similar to the native people.
Bad for them,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. You've alluded a few times to your own youth, and I'm just
Oh,
curious.
fuck. This wasn't the exact quote. I don't know why it linked to this timestamp. I think immigration is a big success story in America. I absolutely do. You won't find me not saying immigration is an important success story in America. That was the quote. I don't know why it linked to something different.
Curious, how did you get in this business? Did you want to be a social scientist, an academic professor when you were growing up? What were the key influences?
I could look through the subtitles, but I'm too lazy. Fuck that. But anyway, yeah, the Putnam thing. I wanted to talk about the social cohesion thing, but I didn't get a chance to do it. I was going to go more, I was more, because I had the fact-based part of this argument rock solid, I wanted to do more philosophy with him. I really wanted to talk to him about religion and souls, because I remember these from my edgy atheist days. This was just like such a slam dunk argument. It's so easy to argue with somebody that's religious because it's so insanely irrational to be religious. The problem is that you have to concede that if you're religious with no evidence because you have no evidence for your belief, and that if you can assert a belief without evidence and expect other people to follow that belief, you have to accept other people asserting their beliefs without evidence and you following their beliefs. And no religious person will make that concession. So you can always force a religious person to back up and say, okay, I'm sorry, I want to maintain my religiosity, but I understand I can't enforce those morals on you. You have to do that with every religious person. If you want to make an argument for any sort of moral or spiritual basis, you have to be able to do so in a secular manner or in a way that doesn't force somebody to accept some sort of supernatural boogeyman. And I don't think Nick would be able to do that because he falls back on tradition and religiosity quite a bit. I had stuff. I looked up stuff on the brain drain. And then I think there was one more topic, was there? Oh, the white guilt argument that only white countries are supposed to take on people. That's not true. Tons of Middle Easterners have taken on refugees and whatnot. Even Saudi Arabia has, I believe, but they don't register them with the UNHCR. So I would never cite Saudi Arabia numbers because I don't know how honest they are with their data keeping. I would have to dig into that a lot to find out how honest they are. Because Saudi Arabia's excuse is they don't believe that people that share the same faith as them are refugees. They think that they're their brothers that deserve help, so they don't register with them in the UN. But that might be bullshit. I'm not sure. I would have to look into that. I noticed that I tried to the biggest problem that I knew I was going to have in this debate, and I think I did okay-ish, but I could have done better. Was pinning the arguments on what I originally said, and it's really hard to do with Gallup and Nick because damn, does he gish Gallup like a motherfucker. But like I think I did a pretty good job at restating the primary argument over and over again because I noticed that he would keep trying to reframe it. So like, but he still slithered out of a lot of my questions. Like when he would link something on tuberculosis, claiming that immigrants brought tuberculosis, he was talking about refugees, right? Refugees from Somalia aren't going to be bringing the same types of diseases as Hispanic immigrants, and he said they would. And when I asked him to prove that, Slytherin Fuentes, Funky Fuentes just danced his way right away from that and started to throw a bunch of other, basically gish-gaddled like 10 other disease stats without linking. He didn't link a single one of these to me and didn't give me the chance to look at anything because he didn't have any of those numbers. So but he didn't want to concede anything. Whew! I didn't think it was going to be that hard to get him to admit that his points were largely fantasy. I thought that he would be a little bit more honest. I thought he would make a few concessions on some things, but damn, dude, he didn't want to concede anything. Damn. You let him talk over and interrupt you constantly. Yeah, so the weird thing is that if you view it from his stream, I'm never going to be talking over him. And if you view it from my stream, I'm always going to be talking over him. So I was willing to let him talk a lot more this time because I would always bring it back. So I was okay with that, right? So basically what I would do is, but maybe I shouldn't have it all because gish galloping is really effective even when you call it out, right? Is I would ask him a question on something. How do people integrate into America? Or how do they have trouble integrating into America? And then he would read me like a 25-point essay on like, this is how many Hispanics are coming to the country. But then I would ask him again, okay, Nick, how does this mean they have trouble integrating? And then we would go back to the primary question. But yeah, Fumbling Fuentes was really, really, really mad. He could not, he just couldn't back up any of his primary, arguments. He kept like, he kept pivoting to like other numbers or other facts. I could do like, I'm curious if I should do like a breakdown of this, or maybe Whoop Whoop will. I'm not sure. I don't think most people even know what gish galloping is. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me give you an example of gish galloping, okay? Okay, so let's say we have an argument over, is Smash a party game, okay? Is Super Smash Brothers a party game, okay? I'm going to gish gallop you. So an intelligent, and this is how Nick functions. I noticed this. I thought that he wouldn't as much if I interrupted him or if I told him that I wanted to talk about each point, but he seems to thrive on the gish gallop, right? So the purpose of a gish gallop is to rapid fire so many premises that you can throw in a conclusion at the end that will be self-evident. Well, every conclusion is, right? But you allowed to stack premise after premise after premise after premise after premise. And once you do that, the other person can't respond. So let me give you an example, okay? Is Smash a party game? I'm going to argue Smash is a party game. How do we know this? Nintendo has released official statements that it's a party game. The average age of a Smash player is 12 years old. The esports money awarded for Smash Brothers is less than $10,000 over the lifetime of the game. There are no professional Smash teams. There are no players that have earned more than $5,000. Have earned more than $5,000 in any professional Smash setting. There are no venues. There's no MLG, IPL, ESL. There's no venue. No, what's that big fighting game tournament thing? EVO. Nobody hosts fighting game tournaments, right? So the thing is that if you let me make all of these arguments. So let's say we get into an argument and I go, okay, Nintendo officially released that it's a party game. The average age of a Smash player is 12 years old. Esports money awarded for Smash Bros. Well, hold on. Let's argue. No. Let me finish, right? There are no professional Smash teams. No players have earned individually more than $5,000. Nobody hosts fighting game tournaments. The skill cap for the game is very low, right? The problem is that if you let me list all of these arguments, when you want to counter my gish gallop, now we have to go back to the very first point. So I already sound like I've won because I gave you 7 reasons on why it's a party game. And anybody listening is going to be like, well, shit, dude. That was a really good argument. Well, now we're going to go back. Now we're going to spend 10 minutes arguing about whether Nintendo released an official statement. Maybe I have, and actually, this is actually real. I think Nintendo has released a statement where they've said that, we don't want to make Smash for, professional game players or something, right? I could link a statement like that, and you and me could argue about this for 15 minutes on whether or not that is correct. And if I win at the end of that argument on only one of my points that doesn't even prove my entire conclusion, it looks like I've won the whole argument. Because if I win on a single one of these points, you're not going to want to go on and argue the next one. You're going to be demotivated as fuck. Okay, fine. Maybe Nintendo did release those statements. The average age of a Smash, and now we have to move from do you understand how difficult it is to counter somebody who's gish galloping? So this is the problem with Fuentes is one of the things that he likes to do is he stacks 15 premises on one another and then this is why I kept trying to argue with him. For instance, about the Mexican thing. And it actually happened. It actually happened several times in our conversation. When he was talking about the integration of Mexicans, or Hispanics, you should say, he brought up Samuel Huntington, integration, Hispanics. He brought up the 6 points or something of this, right? Well, I wanted to go over these one at a time, right? But the problem is he wouldn't let me. He wanted to finish his entire fucking thesis on Hispanic immigrants before he would let me challenge a single point. So it's well, okay, if you want to lay out your entire argument, every single point, maybe I disagree with all of them, well, fuck, it already sounds like I've lost the argument, This is one of the reasons why when I have an argument with somebody, at the beginning of every argument, and you can actually go and you can listen to most of my debates. I might not have said it specifically in this one, which was my mistake. Or I might have, I think I did. No, I did when I restated his arguments. I always tell people, as soon as I say something that you disagree with, interrupt me, and then we can talk about that specific point. Because conclusions are only as true as their premises are, right? Your conclusion is based off the premise, and we're looking for soundness in our arguments, not validity. Nobody cares if your argument is valid. Anybody can rattle off 5 or 10 premises and make a valid argument. We want to know if your argument is sound. Are your premises true, right? But Nick didn't seem interested in arguing the specific premises. He just wanted to lay all of them out and then throw the conclusion. Nick is tweeting like crazy right now. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I really am interested in making truthful arguments, though. That's something that's really important to me. I did put a lot of work into preparing for this. I I guess I'm disappointed. I don't mind getting destroyed in a conversation when the other person has more facts than me. I still don't necessarily agree with the Ryan Dawson guy, and he's kind of a nutty conspiracy dude, but I really appreciate the conversation that I had with him because he had so many facts that I just didn't know, and it was stuff for me to research. I genuinely had no fucking idea like how fucked the Middle East was. I really didn't until I talked to him, and it forced me to re-examine what I viewed of the Middle East. When my conversations with JF, I don't really like JF now, but JF is somebody that I vehemently disagree with, but I learned so much about philosophy talking to him. Jesus, my entire philosophy background I owe to the conversation that I had with him. I really, really appreciate the time that I was able to spend talking with him. Yeah, so I mean, like, if somebody can point out something that I'm wrong about, or even X-skills me, forces me to re-examine some of my political or some of my political or philosophical beliefs sometimes, which is great, even though I hate X-skills me, and I hope he never fucking hears that. When he lists things in chat, it gives me things to think about, like, can I truly justify, these certain philosophical beliefs that I have? Are these assertions actually consistent? It gives me things to think about. So I'm really disappointed that in this conversation with Nick, what I would have liked was, well, Destiny or Steven, here are 15 different stats showing that Hispanics do commit more crime. What do you think about that? And it's like, okay, well, I might have to reevaluate my position. I'll abandon that if it's untrue. But yeah, he didn't have any fact-based arguments for anything, which was like nothing, like none of these, which was just really disappointing. Show off the tweet that you wanted to show before. Oh, I already kind of made it. It was really mean. I didn't want to get into the personal insults before our I didn't want to get into the personal insults before our debate though, so I didn't do it. Hold on, what did he tweet? Let me find his original tweet. I've already kind of tweeted it now, so it's not really relevant. Or maybe I could tweet it again. I don't know. It was going to be pretty funny. This is evidence, guys, of how much I've changed as a person, okay? I am so disciplined now. You have no idea how hard it was to not tweet this tweet, okay? So, so hold on. Okay, so this is what Fidgety Fuentes tweeted, okay? Fidgety Fuentes tweeted this at me, all right? Or not at me, but about me. He tweeted, Stephen Bonnell is welcome to initiate violence against me at any point in time. I would relish being forced into a self-defense situation and defending my life to the fullest extent of the law. So my response to that was going to be, oh shit, are you going to chew me up and spit me out like you do your boogers? And then I was going to say, never mind, I guess you swallow those. And then I was going to link the booger eating thing to him. But that's like so needless. I didn't want to antagonize him coming into the debate. I wanted to, I didn't want him to get like super ass pain because I wanted to have like a good discussion. So do you understand like how difficult it was for me not to tweet that? Oh my God. Is Nick a demagogue? Yeah, I think so. But he's more well read than most demagogues. With regard to the stacking of arguments, can't you just both agree to enumerate your entire arguments first and then go back and address them in turns? In a formal setting, maybe, but when we have these arguments, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to win the minds of the people watching. Neither me nor Nick are going to be budged from our positions. I'm the only person that I know of who will genuinely take on the position. This is a big weak point of mine, is that I will admit when I don't know something. If I am totally wrong on something or you have data that I don't, then I'll concede that point until I have time to research it. That's what I did with my argument with Ryan Dawson. It's what I did in the first 5 minutes of talking to Martin Shkreli. And to some extent, I kind of did it with the alternate hypothesis guy, although conspiracy theorists are a whole other kind of story. But the problem is that when you have people that won't concede a single thing, it becomes really hard. Or not, I'm sorry, if somebody won't... Is Aaron stomping around upstairs? When somebody won't concede a single point to you, then you go in understanding that like this person is never going to be convinced. But that's fine. So your goal is to convince the people watching, and not even people that are watching from both sides. So for instance, if you're in my chat and you're my fan, you probably think that I won the debate massively. If you're a Nick Fuentes fan, then maybe you're going to think that Fuentes won the debate massively. My goal is always to find the people in the middle that are leaning towards his side. Like, okay, well, Fuentes has really good points here, and then when you hear my points, you're thinking that like, oh, that's really interesting. And Fuentes didn't really have a great counter to that. That's something that I should think about. That's kind of my goal. My goal is to just foster an unease, a sort of cognitive dissonance in a point of view that somebody leaning towards that side might have, and then maybe to bring them closer to my side, or even not even, maybe just to encourage them to look into more data themselves is kind of the goal. So I'm sorry. So this was like a roundabout way of saying this is why you can't really. There's no like good formal way to address a Gish gallop. You kind of just can't let it happen, or if it does happen, you just have to keep calling it out, because being able to walk through everybody's arguments is just not realistic in a live debate. What happens is, as I said, you'll list 7 points, and then when the other person goes back to argue, you'll get caught up over the first point, and you'll argue that for the rest of the time. And then when you're done, you're not going to want to go back through every single individual point. Nick was the one that started off with the name calling thing. But so I don't know why he got so. I think he really got mad when I started doing it. I legitimately think he got really, really, really mad when I started doing the name calling thing, which is really funny because he started off by calling me what did he call me? Slimy Steve? Sneaky, I don't remember Wacky Steve. He called me Wacky Steve a few days ago because he's trying to take on Trump's things. I love how dishonest. I think another part where I could expose dishonesty is anytime I exposed that he had a hypocrisy in his philosophy, he would always have an explanation. So for instance, when he says that the will of the people isn't represented in Congress because in a future way the legislation didn't turn out exactly as we wanted it to, and then so there's so many lies in here. First of all, he lied when he said, well, when I say mislead, I'm not talking about intent. Okay. Then why are you bringing up intentional conspiracy theories that had intent behind them as examples? And he's like, well, I think that's a non-zero chance. Okay, if it's non-zero, why are you even bringing it up? It's a non-zero chance that the aliens run the government. Why are we talking about this? You're being dishonest. That's very dishonest. When somebody starts bringing up arguments and then they keep saying it's a non-zero chance, that's a dishonest argument, right? But when I remember when I asked him, I think I got this one from Mike Spam. When I asked him, do you consider Trump then not representing the will of the people? Because everything Trump does so far is unpopular as fuck. And we have polling data right now that proves that. He was like, whoa, no. That's a totally different thing. Why is that a totally different thing? Numberless Nick, once again, fumbling Fuentes, caught in a hypocrisy, not able to reconcile those two differences in a point. Oh, and the Italian trap. I thought of that one on the fly, where I was able to read off the Italian quote, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that perfectly describes Mexicans in the United States." And I'm like, "Well, okay, numberless Nick. What that was all. Those are all about Italians, not Mexicans." And he's like, "Whoa! Well, now it's totally different. Whoa! Fidget and Nick, or Fidget and Fuentes. Now all of a sudden it was totally different, right? Yeah. Yeah, just no consistency on anything. He wants to hardcore read into the word of posterity here, but then when we talk about when we talk about Adams talking about posterity, now he means it differently, or it doesn't count, even though John Jay never even used the word posterity in the original quote that he uses to say what he means when he's describing posterity. It's such a roundabout argument. All of his arguments require you. It's what is the easiest way to get from here to here? Okay, so if we ask ourselves, what is the original intent of the Constitution insofar as European immigration goes? Well, if we read the Constitution, there's nothing in there about European immigration. That seems pretty straightforward. That's a pretty strong argument, I think, right? Should this be law forever? Well, it's not in the law forever. It's not in the Constitution, so probably not. But he's like, okay, well, if we look at what John Jay said in the Federalist Papers, John Jay made this quote in the Federalist Papers where he said that we need to be protecting people that are similar to us. Now, I know that this isn't about immigration at all. Instead, it was about uniting the country to ratify the Constitution. But if we look at what he said in the posterity argument there, and then we go to the Constitution, we go to the, is it in the preamble where he talks about our posterity? Oh, no, wait. What is in the preamble? Hold on, I don't even remember what the exact... Oh, so I'm sorry. He didn't say posterity there. It was a random quote from the Federalist Papers number 2, where he was talking about how we were all similar, so we should all be Americans. So we take this quote here, and we somehow, through soul math or something, figure out that this must be what he means about posterity, even though he doesn't say posterity here. if we look at the Constitution, in the preamble to the Constitution, it says that we should look forward to our posterity, and so we kind of can reach back here. And then if we look at like some of the legislation they voted on that's not part of the Constitution, then we can understand that, of course, European immigrants were always supposed to be favored over other people. And these other quotes from founding fathers disagreeing with that, they don't count. We move around all of that. None of those quotes matter. But this quote absolutely matters. And the thing he said about Catholics, though, about Catholics not being allowed in, that doesn't matter. But this quote does matter, even though he doesn't mention posterity. And Samuel Adams' quote, Sam Adams' quote, where he talks about posterity, that one doesn't matter. And then, this is our argument? Really, dude? Like, it's such a clusterfuck of conspiracy to get here. Like, how are you even thinking this? This is ridiculous, you know? But anyway, yeah, his arguments were so crazy. Holy shit. Nick really didn't seem to understand how stats work with your Hispanic crime rate stats. I think I genuinely thought you were trying to weasel your way out by adjusting for age. Oh, yeah, hold on. So before we get to that, what were we talking about? Oh, so this is the polling data that I had. So Nick's assertion was that Americans didn't want the country to change. I don't think that's borne out in any data, because when I look at the proposed changes to immigration laws, only 30% of Americans said that they wanted to keep country as the most important thing. 15% didn't give a fuck. 20% said they weren't sure, and 36% favored skills. If we left this up to a popular vote, where the people that feel strongly are voting and the no difference is undecided, it goes towards skills. Like, he's trying to claim these groups of people for himself. I don't know why. When we talk about specific provisions of the bill, people approve of it. Yeah, I don't know. Like, he was trying so hard to, like, twist this data. He's like, well, I actually get to claim the 29, 15, and 20 percenters. I get to claim all these people as mine. It's like, okay, that seems kind of weird. But then when he wanted to talk about his poll that showed that where people preferred other people coming from, the plurality in all of these polls was that people didn't even care. In 1965, even when you're past his question of, let's say we do prefer immigrant groups, where should they come from? Most people didn't care. They didn't have a strong preference for or a strong preference against, even compared to Russians in 1965. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just some crazy shit. Oh, and then asking for arrest rates instead of incarceration rates? If we were to ask for arrest rates instead of incarceration rates, that would just favor me even more, because white people are probably more likely to get better representation in the legal system because of socioeconomic status. I'm pretty sure arrest rates would probably favor me even more, because white people tend to get out of prison time more than poorer people like Hispanic people or black people. Another thing that I really enjoyed that he did, and I'm so glad I tried so hard to remain of sound mind, is that, and I called him out, I tried to call him out every time he did this, he kept trying to conflate groups of people to weaken my argument. I only wanted to talk about immigration to the United States. He kept trying to bring in refugees. He kept trying to bring in illegal immigrants. He kept trying to bring in black people. These aren't immigrants. We're not talking about this, Nick. We're talking about immigrants to the United States. Why are you talking to me about Somalian refugees? Why are you talking to me about illegal immigrants? I'm not for illegal immigration. I don't like illegal immigration. I think our immigration system needs an overhaul. It's probably never going to happen, but I don't like illegal immigration. It's fucked up. It's bad on the people immigrating. In some ways, it's bad on the country because we've got harder times tracking these people. It's just an all-around bad meme. And refugees, this is why I kept asking, do you think a refugee and an immigrant are the same thing? Refugees are brought here under a different consideration than an immigrant. You don't expect a refugee to be as productive as an immigrant. That's why they're called a refugee. That's like saying if I drive down the road in the car with my friend, I expect him to give me good conversation because we're friends and we talk to each other, and I expect to be entertained by his company. If I were to stop on the side of the road because I see that somebody's car is broken down and I offer to give them a ride to the 7-Eleven, I wouldn't place the same standard on them for entertainment as I would a friend, because I'm here to help this person out. I understand that they're in a fucked situation. They probably smell bad, or maybe if they're homeless or some shit, but I'll help them out. I'll give them a hand because I'm a good person. When we talk about refugees, oftentimes that's who we're talking about. We're taking people that are from fucked states around the world and we're trying to give them a hand. We don't place the same expectations on a refugee as we do an immigrant. The idea that we would compare refugees with immigrants and illegal immigrants is like so ridiculous. It's so dishonest. And it's very clear when he does it, it's just to muddy all the stats, you know, to try to make things look more in his favor. Oh man, he's going, dude. What? He muted me. Why would I stay on the call after he muted me to listen to him talk? Will you publish your shit? Here, I'll just link it in chat. This is I don't know if you guys have access to this or not, or if it works or not, but I think it's really creepy. I noticed that him and James Allsup have been doing this to me on Twitter. I think it's really creepy that little Nick is trying to tweet like Trump. That's really creepy to me. That like comes off as being like a little bit creepy. James Allsup, who also hosts his show, does the same thing. Let me see when Allsup did this as well. It's a cult of personality. Yeah, if you don't have any personality of your own, I guess you have to get it from the president. I say unironically to a room full of chatters that probably copy a lot of my mannerisms. James Allsup hosts a show with him too. He does the same stuff to me. You're being a little Weasley here, bud. Can't answer her point and instead inject a straw man. A very low blow! ! Yeah, that's like really creepy. Maybe that's what he means about integrating as an American, is copying all the mannerisms of your president. I tried really hard to find evidence of this will of the people thing. I can't believe he wouldn't concede this to me. That's crazy to me, that he wouldn't concede this to me. His argument was so absolutely baseless. Is there anything else you want me to talk about? Oh, I could turn on donations again. Oof, all those donations when I win debates. Oof, win debates. I'm just fucking with you. But what is there anything that I didn't get to go over here? Or anything that you wanted me to talk more about? I guess in terms of if you're in chat and you genuinely disagree with what I'm saying, I welcome any discussion. If there's something that I say that you genuinely disagree with, you let him get away with too much when it came to the 70% poll not caring about immigration. He was making the argument that you'd need a majority in government to pass something like a law that changes immigration. Yeah, I know, but like but like he was wrong on so many points. But this is the problem with the Gish Gallop, is that he kept like pushing and pushing and pushing, and it was like, dude, first of all, you don't even need a majority of the population to back something to pass it, and secondly, you're like the whole will of the people argument was so fucking retarded. Like, holy shit. Did you actually think he was going to be intellectually or not going to be intellectually dishonest? I was hoping not. I guess I don't know. I thought it would be more fact-based. I thought you would have, like, more numbers. Uh-oh. Oh, I think I know what this is. Is it? Once in America, I'm curious if you agree with this statement. Once in America, Mexican immigrants face great challenges, often with no knowledge of the English language and with little formal education. Many Mexican immigrants are compelled to accept low-wage manual labor jobs and are frequently exploited by middlemen who act as intermediaries between them and the prospective employers. Many sought housing in the older sections of the large cities where they settled, and they became known as Little Mexicos, frequently in overcrowded, substandard tenements which were often dimly lit with poor heating and ventilation. Do you think this is an okay summary of Mexicans in the United States today?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just replaced the word Mexico. I replaced the word Italian with Mexican. These were Italians in the 1900s.
Oh, yeah, and again, and here's the...
What's the difference? Okay, Nick, let's hear it. Slippery Nick. Go ahead, Slippery Nick.
Wow.
Oh, shit. Do you think your time was better spent on 4 hours of this versus 4 hours of doing a prepared content YouTube video on your views of immigration backed up by all the research you did for the debate? They're different types of things. You did good, buddy. Thanks, it's Nina666. That's a really hard question to ask. So the reason why I enjoy this, and I know that there are people like Mike Spam that might fundamentally disagree with this, maybe I could reach more people doing the YouTube thing or having it more presented in like a statistical format. I try to capture some of that in these post-argument like talks that we're having now, and I'm starting to post the outlines. I did it with the Also debate. I'm posting the outlines to all of my debates too, so people can look into it on their own. The thing is that, and this sounds a little bit arrogant, I feel like I'm one of the only people that can engage people like this in a live conversation and have a debate over this kind of stuff, or over these kinds of things. I'm sorry. I don't know many people on the left that can do it without getting very emotionally invested and can actually do it with like fact-based data to back them up and can do it quickly on their feet. I guess like the reason why I'm inspired to do stuff like this is because I see how many people on the left, like Cenk or whatever, fail miserably against live conversations with people like Shapiro, and I feel like this is a format that I excel in, unlike most people on the left. So this is what I really like to do, this kind of stuff. This is really, really enjoyable for me. That I can take somebody like that Fuentes guy, who for all intents and purposes is a really well-spoken, really slick dude, and then have him break down and cry and mute me at the end of a conversation because he's getting so upset that I'm using his own tactics against him. That's very enjoyable for me. I really enjoy that. I do want to get into the habit of doing more prepared content for YouTube. I know I keep saying that. Maybe now that I've actually scheduled my time, I can actually start setting aside time for that once my mobile app is released, which should be in a day or two, and then Oh, upsetty spaghetti. I love the upsetty spaghetti. Shit. Yeah. Have you reached out to do one with Shapiro? I tweeted at him a few times, but like, Molyneux and Shapiro are really, really hard. I think that a debate with Molyneux would be a shit show. I think that Molyneux is intentionally dishonest. So I think the debate with him would sound similar to this. I don't know about Shapiro because I've never heard anybody intelligent confront Shapiro on his horrible data manipulation. So I'm not sure. You should go over why adjusting for age is important. He kept trying to say the numbers favored him when they don't. So here's the thing to keep in mind. If you break down the Hispanic population, and you look at the crimes that they commit as a whole, they kind of commit more crime per capita as a whole than white people do. But when you look at it by age, the numbers tell a different story. So I think that adjusting for age is important because that gives us a more accurate picture of who has the greater proclivity towards crime, right? The reason why I think that is because if we maintain the road that we're on right now, 100 years from now, as Hispanics age, which they have been in the population, and the median age of Hispanics climb, you would expect to see the overall crime rate decrease because Hispanics per age commit less crime than white people, if that makes sense. So for instance, if I had to choose between having a bunch of natives have children, I keep saying white people, I should say natives. If I had to choose between a bunch of natives having children versus a bunch of Hispanics having immigrants coming over here, right, and filling out the labor population, what I would expect to see is as those children reach the age of 20 in the native communities, they will commit more crime than Hispanic immigrants coming over because Hispanic immigrants, when adjusted for age, commit less crime than the native population of people do. So I think that I feel like the breaking down by age is an important part of analyzing crime rates. Because, for instance, if I wanted to do the number one thing I could do I could do two things right now. If I wanted to massively reduce Hispanic crime rates, one, we could import a fuck ton of Hispanic women because women don't commit crime like men do. Very, very, very small. It's like 10 to 1 or maybe even 15 to 1 on number of incarcerated men versus women. And I think it's even more disproportionate of violent crimes. So you would only bring over Hispanic women, and you could bring over old Hispanic people, and then you would see the crime rates filter out and decrease compared to native people. Didn't it take the Irish and Italians 40 years to reduce their crimes and assimilate? Yeah, that's another thing too. Like, I get very irritated, and this is partially anecdotal, but I mean, I've traveled a lot. When you try to tell me that, like, when he says things and he laughs at me and he's like, you're telling me that people in Kentucky are going to be more dissimilar from people in New York City than people in like Africa. I mean, depending on the groups of people you get, yeah. And it especially depends on the particular belief that you get. For instance, white evangelicals in the United States have like half the approval rating of gay marriage versus the Muslim population in the United States. This was some Pew data that was pulled recently that I've seen passed around quite a bit. If we were to talk about things like gay marriage, somebody in rural Arkansas, rural Kentucky, rural Tennessee is going to have more in common with their views on moral and ethics compared to like an extremist Muslim in some African country than they would with somebody in Los Angeles. Yeah, absolutely. Or liberals in New York City. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. It's funny that somebody would laugh like that, but I mean, the past election showed that there is a massive culture divide in the United States between rural and city people. Of course, it's absolutely true, you know? Adjusting for age is really important. In this case, age is considered a confounding factor, and the fact that he didn't understand that shows he doesn't know how data works. Yeah, I noticed that when we were talking about when he wanted to talk about the nationality thing, he's like, well, I have a poll that says that people prefer some people from other countries more. This was actually really, really frustrating for me because I legitimately couldn't tell here if he was being dishonest or if he was just kind of dumb here. And that really bothers me if I can't tell that. Usually I can tell, like, for instance, Lawrence Southern or Sargon of Akkad, these are people that I know are stupid. So I have a very low expectation when it comes to data for them. I wouldn't use as much complicated data because I know it's harder for them to understand anything that's not like written explicitly in a Breitbart article. But for somebody like Fuentes, who I consider to be fairly bright, for him to present me a poll that presupposes the question we are asking, and then to pretend that that poll proves his point about people's stance on the question that has been presupposed in that poll, that's ridiculous. That would be like me asking, that would be like saying, here's another analogy. I could give a million analogies. Do you think slavery should be allowed in the United States? Let's say 20% of Americans say yes, 80% of Americans say no. And I present you that poll. Look, it looks like they don't believe that. And then I do another poll, and I said, if we were to enslave people, who should be enslaved? And people vote 95% Africans, African Americans, 4% Middle Eastern, and then 1% Eastern European or whatever, right? And then he presents me that poll, and he goes, well, look at my evidence. People want to see African Americans enslaved. No, that's not what we're arguing about. Your poll presupposes the question that we're actually discussing. We're trying to find out right now if people actually want slavery. 80% say no, 20% say yes. Why are you giving me a poll that presupposes the question that we're discussing, right? And that's kind of what happened with his well, look, you can see preference towards different groups of immigrants. Sure, I'm sure there are preference towards different groups of immigrants, but that's not the question we're discussing. We're discussing whether or not people wanted nationality-based immigration policy. And all of the data that I had on that is no, It'd be like asking, who's your favorite Twitch streamer, and using the results as evidence that 100% of people watch Twitch. Yeah, sure. I think part of the issue with the Hispanic crime disagreement is that you wouldn't let him have the point that overall amount of crime is higher, but that's not the be-all and end-all data. Well, but that's the problem. It's not really like when we're getting into data, questions are more complicated than that. And that's why I brought up the GDP thing, right? Nobody would ever make the argument that let's look at the GDP of Qatar. Let's compare it to the GDP of Iran. Whoa. Iran is a rich country compared to Qatar. Iranians have almost 400 billion USD. Qatar has less than half of that. Holy shit, Qatar is way poorer than Iran. Will you admit that? Well, no, because that's not technically... Well, hold on. We're looking at the wealth, okay? The total wealth of Iran is much greater than that of Qatar. Admit it. Don't be slippery, Steve. Well, that's not really how we look at that, right? What's your opinion on nationalism? I think it's retarded as fuck. But that's a totally different philosophical argument. I'm against most group theory. I'm not a big grouping person, but I don't think I would advocate that to everybody because I'm relatively unique there. Also, keep in mind, I make a living by standing out, right? My whole point is to be as unique as possible because I'm trying to drive viewers to a stream so that you don't go to another stream. So maybe I have a different outlook on life because of that. But in general, I don't put any stock. I'm not a big family person. I sure as fuck don't give a fuck about my ancestors. I don't give a fuck about the history of my country. I don't give a fuck about any kind of past bullshit. I'm concerned with me today, the culture and community I exist in today, and what I can contribute to that community for my children, for myself, for the people around me going forward. Those are the things that I'm primarily focused on. I don't care about any ancestry or what people thought about 150 years ago or whatever. Since Nick couldn't answer the question, I was wondering what you think are the common values shared among Americans. There aren't any. It's actually, we're an incredibly diverse country, and we believe that a lot of people with diversity, with very diverse thoughts, are still American. I actually asked this question because I was curious if anybody could name. The only thing that I will agree on, the only thing that I could agree on is English. I am, and I could probably be swayed on this. I don't have a very super strong opinion of this, but just thinking about it, I'm okay with English being a national language. I would be okay with that, I think. I asked this question a while ago and tweeted it. What American values would you ideally want immigrants to share if they came to your country, and are these values common between most Americans? And nobody could really list anything that was consistent, right? The number one upvoted thing is separation of church and state. We have very different opinions of this in America. Remember the entire fight between the 10 Commandments? The fact that we have under God that was added in our Pledge of Allegiance or whatever in 1952, and the fact that it's on our money, the fact that Bush will say things publicly like I pray before going to war, that's a pretty wishy-washy line. Some people advocate for a lot more. Or look at even Nick Fuentes himself said that this is a Christian nation, doesn't value the separation of church and state the way that I would. Education is something we disagree massively on. Science, we can't even agree on fucking climate change. So I don't know. It's really difficult in terms of who agrees with these things. Being anti-authoritarian, there were a lot of pro-authoritarians when Obama was doing executive order after executive order after executive order. I think most people like authoritarianism if it agrees with them. Most people want a dictator that is ideologically aligned with their own ideology. When he said American values, he meant values similar to himself, aka Christian conservative. He doesn't consider people with different viewpoints the same level of American. Yeah, that's possible, but fuck him if he thinks that. I don't care. That's a very difficult argument to make. Why is your argument of what is an American better than my argument? because the original intent thing totally fucking fell apart when he tried to make that. I don't think he competently did the original intent thing whatsoever. I can't believe he sent me a fucking Breitbart link. Oh, man. And the amount of conjecture. Oh, I almost lost it. This was actually really hard to control because at some point I have to make a decision of like, when if I abandon this debate? And it happened about 2/3 of it through when I started to call him more and more names because I saw that it was upsetting him so much. But I almost abandoned everything when he was like, show me the study. You're just reading the abstract. I've actually been chewed out from actually 2 different people now for doing that as a layman, you need to be very fucking careful when you dig into numbers from studies. It is not your job as a layman to interpret studies. That is the job of the researchers themselves. That if you do not have the prerequisite background to properly contextualize the data and understand the methodologies used holistically from start to finish, you do not have a comprehensive understanding of all of that, it is entirely irresponsible to go to a study, read specific data points, and then try to extrapolate a conclusion from that ignores the conclusion of the researchers themselves, unless you have the background to do it, right? That's something that I took from 2 different people that told me that, and I've taken that very seriously. So I try not to. I mean, like I might look in a little bit, but I thought that was really funny when he was like, "This is just the abstract." Like, okay, well, like I mean, that's why I asked him, "Well, what is your background? Like, you think you can give a better interpretation of the data than the researchers themselves?" And the funny thing is that, like, what are you going to do? Like, he laughed at me for saying a 100-page thing. I didn't plan for you to read a 100-page study here. Like, you're the one that wanted the fucking link to it. When I asked him about the disease thing, he linked me this Breitbart article. 22% of resettled refugees in Minnesota test positive for tuberculosis. Yeah, but again, this is like refugees, and a lot of these seem to be made up. When I look at this, a lot of these are made up of like fucking Somalians and Ethiopians. Like, what? Do you really think a Hispanic immigrant is going to share the same profile as somebody from fucking Somalia or Ethiopia? What the fuck? Oh my god. I don't have the history background, but I felt strongly calling him out on this because I have an art background, which is similar. I know it. I will make that statement without any history background that art and history are very similar, and that what you have is you have periods of time that exist from music, right? You had very early music. You had early Baroque music that evolved into classical music that built on the ideas from Baroque music. You had Romantic music that built on the ideas from classical music. You had Impressionist music that left some of the things, and then postmodern shit that built on everything else, right? That everything develops as a result of something else. I was going to bet, Nick, but I didn't want to get caught on like some weird slippery bullshit. But like, I'm pretty sure that I could safely make like $1,000 bet that the Magna Carta is probably based on other ideas. I seriously doubt that like 10 British people were raised from birth in a fucking vacuum, and then they were put in a room and people were like, hey, listen up, Brits. We need you to make a big government document, and it can't have any outside influences. Good luck, guys. And then they like left them, and then all of a sudden the Magna Carta came out with no outside influence, no historical reference, with no context of any other societies. They just shit out the the Magna Carta. Like, that took nothing from any. No fucking way, dude. What a fucking dishonest argument. You got to be fucking crazy to say something that fucking retarded. You know, like, come on, dude. Honest question, if there's nowhere else in the world for Christian conservatives to go, is it fair for them to try to preserve that culture here, including by... Why do you need a place to go? You can just go here. No one's attacking your Christianity. You can go worship what you want. There's still churches around. You go do what you want, no? Maybe the Magna Carta was divine law. The Magna Carta was the emergence from the divinity of man, divinely inspired by God himself. Are you certain that that was his influence, that the Magna Carta had no influences? He was trying to say that the Magna Carta was principally British, that it was a British thing. And sure, to some extent, it absolutely was, but it was definitely influenced by other things. And he even conceded that. I think his own chat grilled him on that because he backed away from that. He was like, okay, well, it had Roman influences. Okay, so now it had Roman, and so now we're going way farther back. Rome is not Britain. Come on, dude. Yeah. Can you elaborate on your group theory? Do you hold the same belief for oppressed minority groups? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that grouping yourself as an oppressed minority is a really cancerous thing. But I understand why people do it. I think it's a bad idea, but, I mean, people do what you want, I guess. I'm not going to tell groups of people how to act. I will never do that. I'll sit here and tell you that I think it's fucking retarded, but you can do what makes you happy, dude. That's what America's about, right? Doing things that maximize your own personal happiness as long as you don't infringe on the rights of other people. I don't know if you talked about it, but him shushing you triggered the fuck out of me. Yeah, it's a little annoying, and it's really hard for me to keep track of this. I would actually be interested in seeing timers. I don't expect anybody to do it, but like he kept saying that I was talking too much. I'm pretty sure that he went on for like fucking 2 minutes on some of his points. He would start talking for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then I would try to respond, and he would start like cutting me off. And I was like, holy shit. My name calling was really annoying. I'm sorry, dude. Destiny gonna Destiny. It made him so fucking mad. There's no way I would go back and take it back. It was too much fun for me. I feel like he lost a lot of his credibility when he started quoting like 6 quotes to you at one time. Yeah, that was really. Oh yeah. And when I looked up, because as soon as he started typing, I started to type what he was talking about, and I looked up this Hamilton quote where he was like, well, the influx of foreigners must therefore tend to produce a heterogeneous, I think, compound to change, blah, 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 right? Well, look, this is obviously evidence that he doesn't want non-Europeans to come here. But then in the very next line, and I was able to read this on the fly, the United States have already felt the evils of incorporating a large number of foreigners into their national mass. It has already served very much to divide the community and to distract our councils by promoting in different classes, different predilections in favor of particular foreign nations. This is about Europeans. Heterogeneous? That's not it. But yeah, this was about Europeans. And the funny thing enough is that I could actually go back and use this to support my argument that that they weren't pro like European immigration even at all. Yeah. But I wanted to walk through all of his quotes one at a time, but he wouldn't let me because I knew that he was pulling dishonest quotes out because I looked for these quotes. I looked for it, and I had a friend go over my outline, and we looked together to find quotes that were supporting his point of view, but they just don't exist. Heterogeneous is, I think, what I said. Yeah, I looked for quotes to find out what people thought about immigration, and I found them, and I've incorporated them into my outline. This idea that there were all these quotes that exist that support their idea, it was totally dishonest. And it's obvious that it's dishonest for him, right? Because when I pull out a quote, my quotes are some hard-hitting shit, okay? Right? This is some hard-hitting shit. The government of the United States has never adopted any measure to encourage or invite immigrants from any part of Europe. That's some hard-hitting shit right there, okay? That's a big-ass fucking quote, all right? For him to counter with some weak-ass, foreigners can be bad shit, that's not about non-Europeans, my dude. That's not about Africans, my dude. That's not about Hispanics, my dude. Come on. You gotta do better than that. You gotta do better than that, because my quotes are exactly about what we're talking about, not some weird, like, misquoted bullshit that's talking about something totally different. It really bothered me that he never addressed your points directly. Yeah, he would pivot he kept pivoting and deflecting, like really hardcore. That was really, really, really annoying. I tried to keep bringing him back to the questions, but he wouldn't answer them, which I also think is indicative of the weakness of his argument. He had an inability to answer any question directly. Every time I would ask a question, what are American values? Well, in 1709 and 1792, and then in 1804, we were predominantly, like, what is an American value? Like, you can't just answer any question. Let's go through your values one at a time and talk about them, you know? Like, I love how he's completely unable to answer you when you asked him if the Founding Fathers wanted a white ethno-state. Why didn't they write? Oh, that was another deflection, right? Well, they thought that it was so self-evident. Why would they ever write into the Constitution something that was so obvious? Okay, if you go back to the 1700s, a lot of fucking people owned guns, right? Tons of people owned guns. Why is there the Second Amendment? I don't think he had an answer for that either, right? Wasn't he like, well, that's way different. That's totally different, right? That was like a totally different thing. He didn't have an answer for that. Please give a mediator. I don't think mediators exist in this platform, or real mediators. Look at fucking Dave Rubin. He can't even do it live. I love how he tried to a priori some of his conclusions too. My logics. I like how he tried to well, if a lot of Mexicans come here, they can't integrate. That's a priori. What? No, it's not. That's the topic of discussion. You can't just presuppose the conclusions that we're arguing about. How is that fair? Logic games. Well, let's assume that if infinite Mexicans come here, they can integrate. We see that 8 million Mexicans have come here. Therefore, 8 million is less than infinite. They've integrated. Well, okay, I don't agree that infinite numbers of Mexicans integrate. Sorry, kid. That's a priori. Nothing personal, kid. Oh, well, shit. I guess fuck. Fuck me, then. Jesus. I still don't understand how your conclusion walking out of conversations like that was that it was productive and that people on the left More people on the left should engage in conversations like this. So I don't believe that the entire platform of YouTube should be conceded to people on the right. And I feel like part of the reasons why people on the right come off better than leftists is because people on the right are always willing to engage others with their ideas. I think that the left lost the YouTube wars, the online influence wars, and I don't think there's any reason they should have. And I feel like a refusal to engage with people that you disagree with, like I think that there's something offered here that isn't offered on like the Philip DeFranco channel or people that just cover the news. I guess is like my goal. I'm going to start saving like the emails that I get, because I do get like, especially after the last debate, I got like a really healthy number of emails from people telling me like, hey, I watched your conversation with that dude and you definitely swayed my opinion on a lot of things. And I like getting those emails. I don't know if I would necessarily get the same by just having a channel where I just talk about news. Not that that's bad, but I think this is a different type of thing. How do you deal with endless Twitter mentions and shit posting? I don't know. It's funny to me, dude. These guys are so fucking mad. I just like watching all of it. They're so mad. Didn't he implicitly say that blacks are predisposed to crime or something? Yeah, he started to, but we didn't go down that route, which is probably better for both of us. The gap you need to bridge is between there aren't enough leftists on YouTube and the leftists losing the YouTube war is bad. I don't think the leftists should lose the YouTube war. I think they just decided to because they thought that all their ideas were just, I don't know, self-evident, so they didn't think it was worth arguing. I don't like the idea that, like, I guess, like, the big thing that bothers me, especially somebody that's so heavily involved in gamer culture, is the idea that, like, that it's, like, feels versus reals between leftists and rightists, that the right people have all the reals and the left people have all the feels, when I think I've demonstrated in a lot of these arguments exactly the opposite. When you get into big arguments with people like Fuentes or Lauren Southern, all of them retreat back to their feelings on culture, their feelings on religion. They don't have reals or numbers to back up any of their arguments at all. Most of what they're talking about is founded in fantasy. These ideas that immigrants come and destroy countries and shit, or they're bad for our economy, like, these are totally feels arguments. I don't think there's any reason why the left should have conceded that. I think that if people like me or ContraPoints or H-Bomber Guy, I don't know so much about him, but like Sean and Jen, if these people existed on YouTube earlier, rather than the Zoe Quinns, the Brianna Woos, the Arnita Sarkeesians, if these people existed rather than the other group, that we would have been doing way better on the left in terms of winning the culture war.